Everybody, welcome to this live edition of the Atheist Experience. Just like almost any other week, it's November 27th. It's a Sunday. We're coming to your living room or your bedrooms or wherever, because not only are we out on public access television, but we're streaming live over the internet. You can find out more about the show at www.atheist-experience.com, and there you'll find the archive for the show as well as information about upcoming episodes and whether or not there will be one, because on occasion we do have to cancel. We're not canceling today, though. We're here in the studio. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me is Don Baker.
Hey, good
Welcome.
to be here. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was Thanksgiving week here in the United States. Too much turkey. But we are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. And the ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host our lecture series at the Austin History Center. You can find out more about the ACA and our events at www.atheist-community.org. There's a frequently asked questions page, a calendar of events, other ways to contact us, our charter, just about anything you could want to know. If you dig around a little bit, you'll find it there. The ACA also sponsors two podcasts in addition to this one. There's Nonprofits, which you can find out about at www.nonprofitsradio.com, which is Prophets, and also Godless Bitches, which is godlessbitches.podbean.com. It's at the bottom of the screen right there, which is the newest podcast hosted by my wife, Beth Presswood, and featuring Linnea Glasser, Tracy Harris, Jen Peoples, lots of guests, lots of good stuff coming up, and it's becoming quite popular. People are really enjoying hearing about feminism and sex issues on occasion.
I'm enjoying it
from an atheist perspective. We need more female voices, just in general. So this doesn't become and more voices of color as well. So this isn't just the old white boys club. So if you're thinking about doing something like this show or a podcast of your own, I can't give you all of the answers and the how-to and everything else. But if you want, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-hosts, all the people behind the scenes. I've been doing the show for 6 years or so, and it's been on for 13, 14, something, who knows. You may not have access to public access TV in your area because it's kind of going away around the world, around the United States. There are still some places that allow you to do it. Some won't let you do live shows. Some won't let you take live calls. We're fortunate that in Austin we're still able to do both, and we should be able to do this for quite a while. But on the off chance that we lose the studio, we've already got plans to continue streaming it on the internet and just record it on our own. And we did it from my place, kind of guerrilla style for a while.
Right, the show must go on.
Yeah, and so there's the opportunity for more local groups to have more, not just events, but more activism and more educational opportunities, shows like this in your area. Just, YouTube is a big help, Ustream.tv. There's tons of other opportunities out there. Get yourself a blog and a camera and a microphone and get your voice out. Make yourself heard, because we need a lot more voices.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
You can visit the ACA website for more information. After the show's over, anyone who would like to join us, we go to El Arroyo. They'll have the address up on the screen. Oh, I bet before I finish saying this, there it is. That's the people in the booth who make the show actually happen. I just show up and talk. Don actually prepares things to talk about. I just, blah, 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 blah. It's a live call-in show, by the way, and we'll be taking calls. And just for those who are curious, that we have 4 lines in the studio. I see that they're all full, so I won't keep us waiting too long. I'll let Don get to what he's talking about. But a couple weeks ago, we had an issue where there were a number of people who thought they'd be cute and call in and prank call and pretend to be a Christian, a particular crazy Christian, whatever. And sometimes it's really difficult to spot who's legitimately offering up their beliefs and who's doing a parody.
Yeah, look up Poe's Law.
Yeah, we don't have any interest in people calling in to parody. It's annoying. You turn the show into a joke because when there's plenty of real believers out there that'll see clips from the show and say, "Oh, look at this! They only take these fake calls or the stupid calls, or they don't address real arguments."
Right.
And
We'd rather have real dialogue.
You tie up a phone line from somebody that might have been a good call. There's nothing much I can do about it at the moment because, like we said, you can't always tell. For every, no matter how crazy you think a belief may be, there's probably somebody out there who holds that belief, and they may call in. So it's difficult to tell. We're going to do our best. We're also going to make some changes in the future and possibly require people to call through like a Google number or something like that, where we will have caller ID. I don't like trampling on people's anonymity, but if it's going to be abused and it's going to drag down the quality of calls in the show, then that's what we'll do. So if you're just sitting there and you want to hear yourself, on TV, call somebody else's show. Do the Baba Booey thing somewhere else. We don't need it. Anyway, Don, what do you got for us this week?
Well, I've been on the last couple months talking about the failures of Christianity, and there are many such failures, and there are many large failures. And I'm hoping that in doing this, it will beg the question in people's mind of how this omnipotent God is allowing this to happen, or how these religions that are supposedly in favor of this God are able to make such huge mistakes. And in the past, I've talked about the abortion policies in the U.S. as being a giant failure, Christian-based abortion policies. I've talked about the genocide of the Jews. It's a failure no matter how you slice that. Today I want to look at the failure of the Catholic Church in particular in dealing with its pedophilia problem. Now, most people know that child molestation is wrong, right? Children are vulnerable, they're trusting, they're easily manipulated. So using children for sex is an abuse of power, and our secular laws and our secular values reflect this, and we have laws against this sort of thing. Okay, but Christianity is rather confused on this. First, children are targets of indoctrination, right? If there's this great quote by Saint Ignatius of Loyola, Saint Ignatius Loyola, "Give me a boy until he is 7, and I will give you the man." And the idea here is, this is from the early 1500s, probably. The idea here is that it just takes 7 years of the first 7 years of a kid's life to indoctrinate them and turn them into a believer or whatever. So also, children are treated as a means to an end. In the Bible, they're treated as arrows of God. Or if you ever go to a Catholic wedding, you're supposed to have lots of children to keep the church alive. And there's this idea that souls are more important than bodies, so if there's abuse or whatever, it doesn't matter as long as they're saved. So there's not a lot of whole prohibitions against this. Like if you look in the Bible, there's killing children for God is okay with Abraham and Jephthah. Sex with children is okay. You have Lot messing with his daughters, making babies with his daughters in Genesis.
Well, to be fair, that's not portrayed as okay.
Well, no, he was called later a just and righteous man in the Bible.
No, before he was called a just and righteous man. That's why he was saved from Sodom.
Okay.
But in any case,
we can debate that offline. When the Catholics are saying, well, this is wrong, they point to, of all things, the biblical commandment against adultery, where neither party is married. Most people, I think of adultery as having to do with marriage. Anyway, and the other failure is if the pedophiles are praying for a sign from God or whatever, they're not going to get it. So they're going to get whatever answer they want. So we've got a problem here, and I think the church either attracts or makes sexual deviants. So this is really a big part of the problem. So those people who are called to God, maybe they're young and they're naive and they're attracted to the power of the church, but they don't really necessarily realize the burden of celibacy and how difficult that is, especially for a younger person. And they because they enter the priesthood often very early, they don't end up establishing normal adult relationships with people, and I think that this is part of the problem. And maybe the Catholic Church appeals to people who really like being around kids, because you certainly are exposed to a lot of kids, and this can provide a lot of temptation. For some people, I think that the Catholic Church provides this drama with sin, where you are sort of self-flagellating yourself or self-loathing because you're sinful and you're inherently evil, but you're going to get redemption through the church or through worship. You're going to get forgiveness, and I think that attracts people who are deviates, who are looking for some sort of redemption. And we find that in a study done by the John Jay College in 2004 on the pedophile priests, 19% of those had substance abuse problems. Maybe some of these people are molested as children. It turns out that 7% of the people doing this were molested themselves. And maybe they want to have that power over others. Or maybe they developed a warped sense of sexuality based on religion trying to control it. But here, we have all sorts of potential inroads here for people to become abusive of children through the church. So I think the church attracts naive and broken people looking for a cure, or looking for a better life, for which the church does not provide, because God doesn't really exist and doesn't have any power to do all these things. So the people that go and serve as priests end up perpetuating these sorts of evils into the next generation. So say you're the Catholic Church now, and you've figured out you've got a problem on your hands. You've got all these pedophile priests running around, and they're getting into trouble. How do you solve it? What are you going to do? Well, if you're a secular organization, you deal with the problem, but with secular tools. You use the law. You are open about it. You deal with the problem immediately. You address it. You take care of the victims. These sorts of things. You provide training to your people to avoid this. You do background searches. You have zero tolerance policies. These sorts of things. These are the secular ways of dealing with it. And this has been successful in many organizations. But if you're the Catholic Church, you call it a spiritual problem to be fixed by prayer. Now let's open that up a little bit. That reminds me a lot of our governor here, who called budgets and finding jobs in the state a spiritual problem that was in need of prayer. It seems like it's a cop-out. It's a way of saying, well, I'm supposed to do this thing, but if I screw up, we'll blame God, because if God doesn't answer a prayer. And us atheists have a phrase, nothing fails like prayer. So what else did the Catholic Church do? It hid the fact and tried to sweep it under the rug. So it created a wall of secrecy regarding these sorts of incidents, and actually there was an edict created that mandated this sort of secrecy, and that all of the penalties and things were handled through the Catholic Church and circumvented any local law enforcement. So they disabled a lot of secular mechanisms that could have helped. So there's a lot of victims that have been bought off. There are victims that have been browbeaten and threatened with hell or excommunication, these sorts of things. The Catholic Church has moved people around, hoping it would get better, and it didn't. So God, the Bible, prayer, and all their magic crackers, the blood of Jesus, rosaries and relics, and all this stuff that they have on their side that supposedly gives them all these magical powers, failed. Every last one of them failed to solve the problem. And as a result, we have tens of thousands of victims that we know about over at least 50 years. In some Vatican documents, it goes back to, it was recognized in 1741 that they had a sex abuse problem. So this has been around a while. It took off in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This involves multiple countries, and it's been, A failure for Catholicism too, because it's cost in the United States has cost them $2.6 billion to deal with payouts to the victims and these sorts of things, and what a waste of money and what a waste of sad harm to children. So it's a failure of Catholicism as well. I mean, no matter how you slice it, is a failure. So when faced with such a blatant and obvious failure, how did the Vatican respond? Well, they respond with lies and spin. They claim that there's no harm to the victims, or that it's just a few bad apples, or they attack the credibility of the victims. They're children after all. They can't be trusted. They went into manipulation mode, so they browbeat people into submissions, saying, you're going to go to hell if you tell, threatened with excommunication. There was one victim that was told, Jesus died for your sins, so you think you could handle that. And I think that's just really sad. It's sort of saying, well, you've bought into this whole idea that you get to go to heaven, for just believing, then you can suffer. It's okay if you suffer. They evaded. They've claimed that church-state separation allows them to do whatever they want and evade whatever laws. They've actually claimed that. They've stonewalled criminal investigations. They've cried that they've run out of money for bankruptcy, and that they're a wonderful charity. And gosh, look at all this charity that's going down the drain. The Pope himself has claimed diplomatic immunity to evade any sort of justice. And there's been a lot of blame shifting. They've blamed the gays, they've blamed reporters, they've blamed the permissive culture of the United States, they've blamed the devil, they've blamed pornography. They've blamed, the Vatican has blamed the individual dioceses, although the Vatican has been exerting a lot of control over them. So what we see here is a very reluctant movement by the Vatican towards secular morality that would have greatly mitigated this harm. And what's really sad is there was a set of guidelines published back in 1978 about how to deal with this, and they were completely ignored. So a lot of this harm is just completely gratuitous. The latest guidelines that the Vatican has issued are still suggestions for the diocese. It's still, just a slap on the wrist. And there is still an edict in play that says to run all pedophilia complaints through the Vatican in secret and hide it from the law. So there's no real house cleaning here. The current Pope himself have shuttled priests around. He has actively participated in the cover-up, and this is supposedly the best Christian in the entire universe, and this is your representative. So, and the Vatican has done its usual thing of talking out of both sides of its mouth. It's claiming to the victims that, oh, we're fixing this problem, but their policies really aren't changing. And I blame the laity too, because ultimately, all of the money and power in the Catholic Church comes from the people who donate money and follow their orders. And there's a failure extends to all of Christianity, I think, too, because there's this notion of religious tolerance and not talking bad about this other thing. And for all the money and time that the Christians have spent trying to screw over gays, for example, or trying to get married, they could have maybe cleaned house here and actually made the world a better place. So from an atheist perspective, the failure of the Vatican to deal with this problem is an obvious consequence of a broken model of the world, right? If you start with a broken model of the world, you're going to make mistakes. And prayer doesn't work. I think the Vatican has proved that very well. Children should not be exploited. That's just a pretty obvious thing, and that's what's got a lot of people pretty angry at the Catholic Church, myself included. And there are lots of lies that cause more trouble than good, and they've just been caught in their lies over and over again, and a lot of us are pretty fed up with it. So the failure was so big it shot the Catholic Church in the foot, although a lot of Catholics are still hardcore believers, and the failure is largely of their own making, their own design. So it's clear there's no God involved in fixing this mess, despite the claims that there's some big God out there that's that supposedly has some special relationship with the Catholic Church. It's clear that their main techniques are lies, manipulation, and spin, and they're using the same tactics that they use to market their religion to the global masses, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know why anybody would trust this organization. I certainly don't. I don't know why we as a country are giving these people tax breaks, because they're obviously a criminal organization. And we should blow up this crime ring and bring them all to justice. So that's what I wanted to say today.
And in completely unrelated news, earlier this month, Ireland announced that the Vatican was no longer welcome at its embassy. They swear that this has absolutely nothing to do with the Coyne report, which Prime Minister Enda Kenny said that the report exposed the dysfunction, disconnection, elitism, the narcissism that dominates the culture of the Vatican to this day. But both Ireland and the Vatican are saying that their expulsion from the embassy has nothing to do with this, and that relations between them are just fine. And they're pointing to the fact that Iran and Southeast Asian countries were also excluded from the embassy as cost-cutting measures. In any case, I thought it was funny.
Well, they're trying to play the country card, right? They want to be a country just when they want to use the diplomatic community, to go do harm in other countries.
They're a nation state. They just aren't very cooperative with law enforcement when it comes to issues. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started on calls. By the way, if you don't get through on the phone today, or you don't want to get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. We get tons of mail that we can't answer, but we do try and read and respond to as much as we can. And if you want to make sure that your email gets through the spam filters, you should probably put AETV or NPR for nonprofits in the subject line, which kind of helps out a little bit.
Having a subject line helps too.
Yeah, if you don't have a subject line, probably won't get through. And if all you send is a link, I'd just delete those. If you don't have any text at all, you just sent a link, bye-bye. I'm not going to click around at random. If you saw some of the links I got sent in email, you'd understand why. But we got Michael in, is it Pocatello?
Yeah, it is.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing just fine. I'm a little starstruck right now. I'm a big fan.
Well, thanks.
Anyway, I guess the best thing right now is just to tell you a little bit about my little story here. I was raised a Mormon. 17 and a half years of my life I was a Mormon. And then I finally started to look into it, and then I stopped believing in it. I've read the Book of Mormon and the Bible all the way through. Have you read the Book of Mormon?
I read most of it.
You've read most of it?
I haven't dug through it in detail. I ordered a Book of Mormon and actually spent 2 hours on the phone with the person who calls to make sure you got the book. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, they don't miss an opportunity for.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, I pretty much have been really happy as an atheist, not going to church and whatnot, I'm a real big fan of yours. I've actually watched a lot of the Atheist Experience on YouTube, and other big fans of other channels like Dark Matter 25 and Grappling Ignorance, and those guys, Thunderfoot. But I guess the reason I decided to take another look into the Mormon religion was because I have a girlfriend who's Mormon, and I'm actually about to ask her to marry me, and she doesn't want to marry outside of the Mormon church. So she's not going to force me to become a Mormon, but she asked me to take another look at it. Mm-hmm. So for the last couple of months, I've been going on to Mormon.org and going onto their chat rooms where you can pull up a chat, you give them the email address, and talk with a missionary that's stationed in Utah. Mm-hmm. And I've been having this conversation with them, and finally, almost every time they've asked me to try to talk to, I get into these in-depth conversations with them, and they encourage me to try to talk to a missionary. Well, my family is Mormon, so I really want to keep that on the low. I don't want my family to get involved in that. And anyway, so I finally just gave in and got back on there and asked to speak with a missionary. And I got a phone call from these two sister missionaries who were talking to me, and we had a rather long conversation. But one of the things that they had me do, and this is what's kind of planted a little seed of doubt in my head, was they told me to pray. They asked me to pray over the phone with them. And honestly, it was the first time I've ever prayed, since I was probably 16 years old. And I don't, I don't know. It's just I did approach it from a skeptical standpoint, but there's just something there, that they were trying to that they got me to do that, and it was really something interesting. But
I don't know what you mean by something there that got you to do that.
Well.
And
okay,
how was it interesting?
Sorry. I ended up praying, and I don't know. I felt something different that I can't really describe. And but.
So you had a change of mental state.
Yeah.
Okay, and you think that something supernatural caused that?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
How did you determine that that was possibly the cause?
Well, that's a good point. That's why I like you, Matt. You're a very, very logical guy.
Well, the issue here is that if you, okay, first off, there may be very simple explanations for what happened, right? But I think the bigger issue is just because you don't know something doesn't mean you can jump to a conclusion, right? The lack of evidence for something is not evidence for something else, right?
So right, no, I agree with that.
So like, for example, I was a Baptist for any number of years and prayed frequently, and there were occasions where in church, when you're singing and praying and other stuff, that I would feel something. And the thing is, I always identified it as the presence of the Holy Spirit. Now, why did I do that? Well, because everybody else around me was claiming that this is, oh, yeah, I feel like that too, and that's the Holy Spirit. That's the explanation I was given, and I accepted it without question. As I got out of there, I found that I can have those same types of experiences from entirely secular sources. And so this is more about the way the human mind works. This is more about people getting together and participating in activities and feeling, joy and all human experience without there's no justification for claiming a supernatural source to it. And even if there were, even if we didn't have a justification for a supernatural source, but we had no reason to think that we understood why it happened, you still would be at the point of, I don't know. You couldn't then say, oh, I had this experience, and because I can't think of any better explanation, therefore Mormonism is true. I mean, that's a huge logical fallacy. That is the argument from ignorance, or the fallacy, the argument from ignorance, saying, I can't come up with an explanation, therefore this other one is suddenly plausible. It's especially when the explanation that you're leaping to is one that you could not possibly determine the plausibility of. There's no way to quantify the likelihood that this particular source that you'd like to attribute is truly associated. And in the largest and best studies on prayer, especially intercessory prayer, prayer fails. It fails to perform any better than chance, and in fact, when people know they're being prayed about, it does worse. They took heart patients and divided them up into groups where some were being prayed for and some weren't. And in each of the groups, some people knew that they were being prayed for. And of course, the ones that knew they were being prayed for ended up doing worse. And there's a speculation that there was some kind of performance anxiety, that they, they didn't want to make prayer look bad.
This is one of the bigger, best conducted prayer studies ever done. It was done by the Templeton Foundation, Templeton Society, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. If I could interrupt you, where can I find that study online?
Look up Templeton Prayer Study. That'd probably.
If you Google prayer study fails, it's the first result.
Okay. All right.
There's also a good website. Why doesn't God heal amputees? That goes into a lot of these sorts of things, and they do a pretty good job beating up on prayer.
But yeah, I encourage people to, keep looking. I wish you luck with your relationship and your further investigations and everything else. But you should never believe anything until you have a really good reason. And if I felt something is the best that you got, I don't.
Pretty weak.
I couldn't believe anything.
Well, now see, there's something interesting there. Now, in one of these debates that I had on Mormon.org with these missionaries, there was a missionary by the name of Ben. Didn't give me a last name, obviously. He said that he believed personally through his own revelation that that the sixth sense of the human mind was not actually ESP, but rather being able to, like, emotion was the sixth sense. And his evidence for that was, have you ever felt something in your gut, that had a gut feeling, and it turned out to be true? And there are some people, he says, that have gut feelings and they're always true. And
well, those people can get $1 million from the James Randi Educational Foundation.
Really?
Anybody that would qualify as some sort of supernatural, psychic power type thing. If your intuition was absolutely correct all the time, that's an easy $1 million from the JREF. It's a walk in the park. And curiously, nobody gets the $1 million. We test it over and over again. So
your story is anecdotal, and it's not particularly convincing.
Yeah, we talk about. I had a debate a week ago Thursday, and the video for it's actually online. You can click a link on our website to get to it. There's at least one or two other debates coming up, but during the Q&A portion, somebody brought up. It was actually, I think, the last question. What I thought about miracle claims, and of course, you hear these all the time, and some of them are truly miraculous sounding, and others are rather trivial, and none of them have any good evidence supporting them. Otherwise, we'd have Nobel Prizes awarded to people who had researched and confirmed miracles, and we would have the JREF handing out $1 million for miracles.
It'd be a different world.
It would be on the front page of every newspaper and every science journal, and researchers at every university would be running around to investigate all of these miracles, if in fact any of them had been confirmed. They're not confirmed. And when pressed on this, Mark, my opposition in the debate, talked a little bit about miracles that he'd seen. And to me, people are starting to use this word in a way that I think cheapens it, because, they're talking about miracles of, I've seen lives transformed. Bad people have become good. That's not a miracle. There's nothing miraculous about that. I've seen bad people become good people become bad. We've seen spontaneous remission of cancer, with and without prayer, by the way. So obviously, if it happens regularly, in a world where with 7 billion people and different interactions going on all the time, we're going to find all kinds of weird things that don't have explanations, and that's fine, and we should look for the explanations. But when people start to say that the explanation is their supernatural buddy, that's absurd. And that's where you get this.
That's a wild claim that needs to be supported.
Yeah, and if somebody says that their intuition is always correct. And by the way, you talked about sixth sense. There's a lot of senses: sense of direction, sense of heat and cold. All those things. What they're talking about is a sense. These gut feelings, these intuitions. That's not a sense. That's a guess. And somebody who can guess right 100% of the time can get $1 million from the JREF. All they got to do is set up the test.
They can get even more than that from the lottery.
Yeah. Why haven't these people intuited the numbers from the lottery? Yeah. Good point.
Well,
anyway,
maybe you didn't really mean it like 100% like that.
And the hedging starts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And by the way, okay, I'll hit this last point, and then I got to get on to other callers because we only got like 20 some odd minutes left. The one you just said about that intuition of don't get in a car, you'll get in a wreck. Here's the thing about that. Not only is it extremely susceptible to confirmation bias, because if you don't get in the car, you're not going to get in a wreck. And so the only way to test it is to get in the car and see if you're wrong. And if you're only recording the ones that you think were right, I mean, there's no way to prove it. We can't rewind the clock and have them also get in the car to see what would have happened. So for them to claim that they're right simply means that they don't have a clue what it means to be right, because there's no way to confirm that they were right unless they got in the car and had a wreck. And they did this consistently, in which case we'd take their license away. But But in all seriousness, there's some of these things that you just can't confirm, and yet people assert them as if they are confirmed with unbelievable confidence. And there are others that, when tested, they fail. And we are very bad about estimating success rates. We are very prone to bias. We are infatuated with our own intellect and our own direct experiences. The people that we know make up our understanding of the world, and so our
we're wired to
biases
see patterns that may or may not be there, and all these sorts of things, right?
When you interact with people and you start thinking that everybody acts this certain way, when really it's just a limited set of people that you've interacted with have this, this certain action. If you look a little more broadly, you find that it's not true, and that's the one of the many problems. There's confirmation bias. There's small sample sets. And then there's the sharpshooter fallacy, where when they think that they got something right, they draw the bullseye around it and ignore all the misses. But anyway, I got to let you go, Michael. I appreciate the call.
Oh, I appreciate it too, Matt. Hey, I can't thank you enough, man. You helped me out.
Sure, thanks a lot. All right, we've got Dean in Auckland, New Zealand.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
Hey, thanks for waiting, Dean.
Hey, I just wanted to touch on 3 points today, and I'll summarise them before I go into any detail, because with the time mercilessly slipping away, you may want me to focus on one as opposed to all three. But there were three things I wanted to cover. One was, and I suppose most of my perspective on atheism has come from predominantly someone like Sam Harris, who I'm assuming you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Of course. Was my concern for the most part around not so much the attacking of fundamentalists and extremists, because they tend to dig their heels in regardless of what evidence is presented to them, but just I suppose it comes back to the whole Vatican issue before, is it's not so much the irrationality of the Vatican, it's so absurdly obvious, it's the taboos around criticising religious belief in general, and we experience it even here in New Zealand around not so much. What I find is that on all ends of the spectrum, from fundamentalists right through to liberals, they all get their ideas out of the same book. Now, clearly, moderates and liberals aren't really dangerous in any sort of active sense, but the problem I have is that in order to marginalise and criticise fundamentalists, you have to be able to criticise the books. And when you have moderates and liberals rising to the defence of these books, oh no, they're just misinterpreting it, they're just not looking at the Bible or massaging the information out in the right way, that tends to prevent us from being able to criticise any of the really barbarous forms. That's my first point. The second point was, actually I'll skip the second point because it ties in with the third anyway, which is I've really only had one perspective on this from Sam Harris, and on the face of it, it tends to make a lot of sense, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, was a concern around the existence of a word for a non-belief, and the cost of actually using a word, which is to say using atheism in opposition to irrational beliefs, tends to attract a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah, it's
when you just use the word atheism and paint religion with a broad brush, as opposed to simply using reason and evidence on specific issues.
Yeah, it's one of the dumbest things Sam's ever said.
I wouldn't go that strong.
I would. I think it's one of the dumbest things that Sam's ever said. Now, I like Sam, and I tend to agree with him on all kinds of things. And when he came out with The Moral Landscape, I had actually been running around at universities giving a talk about the superiority of secular morality, and I stopped doing it because I didn't feel the need to keep doing this as long as the book was out, and he and I were thinking similarly about this.
I love that,
But this idea that we should stop using a word, I just find it nonsensical, because we've tried, or some people have tried, using other words to describe themselves. First of all, I don't think it's absurd to have a belief or to have a label for a position that is negative, and I'll point you to abolitionists as a good example. The people who are opposed to slavery, they had a label. It's got to do with a movement, and you take a label that may appear negative, like, oh, I don't know, cancer-free, or eliminating cancer. I mean, cancer-free is positive, but ending cancer is negative. But you can't think about it in the simplistic of whether or not there's a negative in the term. So for me, using the atheist label, first of all, it's honest. The options out there where people are like, we want to use bright or
rationalist, free
whatever.
thinker.
And then, okay, somebody says, well, what does that mean? Well, once you get talking about what they mean, and then they say, well, doesn't that mean you're an atheist? And then you say, well, yeah. Oh, well, why didn't you say that? We could have short-circuited all this. I'm a fan of actually cutting to the chase. An atheist actually describes my views on God claims very quickly.
Right.
And I think that God claims, the theistic claims, are something that have to be addressed and have to be opposed. And so the easiest way...
I'd have to agree to some extent, and the reason I think he's slightly off with this, and when I can take his points on the misconceptions, I don't think the fact that misconceptions exist necessarily means we have to ditch the word. I just think it means we have to be clearer at actually removing the misconceptions.
Yeah.
I think the reason where religion is different, and this is something that Sam Harris does point out, is that it's the only area of our lives where reason is removed from the table, and it becomes an explicit detachment from rational discourse, and actually just faith becomes a virtue. I don't know. I just noticed from my own experience
what's that
in
have
the
to
early
do?
days of people asking me what I actually believe.
What's that have to do with the label?
My answers were, well, we just don't know, and two, I think the way to figure out what we know is not to just take things on faith.
Well,
People would say to me, "Oh, you're an atheist."
Yeah, I don't understand what any of that has to do with whether or not you use a label, but I think when somebody asks you what you believe and you say, we just don't know, you've avoided the question. Because they didn't ask what you knew about, they asked what you believed.
So, what are your thoughts around the misconception? Because it's a big issue. It's something that I've talked about and I've experienced in my own life, and I've looked enough of your YouTube clips to see it happen with yourselves as well, is that you get asked the question time and time again, what is atheism? And I can see that you get quite tired of actually having to explain yourself over and over again. So what are some of the pragmatic steps that you think people in our personal lives can take, or people like yourself could do to actually address this and actually
Well, I think it has
clarify
a pretty simple definition, and you just give it and move on. And you, I don't know, there's this common belief or common definition that atheism means that you're absolutely sure there is no God.
Yes.
And so, that does describe some atheists, but that doesn't describe everybody. And I think you do have to spend a little bit of time dispelling that, because it ends up being a straw man, right? It's a position that's takes a fair amount of defense, right, to hold that position, right? But if you go with the definition that it's just a lack of belief, then it's pretty unassailable, right? Because you're talking about your own mind.
The big thing is that you asked, how do we, kind of solve this, and it's got to do with education, and just because a word has some baggage, I think the solution is to actually use the word and change people's minds about who atheists are and what atheists believe. And I find it incredibly dishonest to say, hey, let's come up with a new label for ourselves and see if we can't work around this way, kind of backdoor our way in. I have no interest in that, because...
I wasn't suggesting coming up with an alternative, I was suggesting raising this point of not having a label at all, but I actually take your points, and it actually leads me to something I was going to make an observation on, is that when you have a look at secular Europe, it's almost as if, to some degree, the word atheism doesn't need to exist, because the vast majority of people just accept reason over it. But would it be fair to say
we are in an organization
in the States, there's more of a need for the word, particularly in the States, because you have people that are so many people in the closet. You do need to identify yourself, and do need to actually have a context in which people can come out and feel safe, so to speak.
Yeah. I was going to say that we work in an organization whose goal, I think, is to get rid of the organization, right? Yeah. We're working towards a time when there doesn't need to be a distinction, when there doesn't need to be this fight. And yes, you do raise the point that there are a lot of folks out there who are very sympathetic to what we're doing, and I think that if they sort of hear our message, we're gathering numbers. And I think we... Okay. Both as a TV show here in our little local Austin and as a larger movement, I think we're becoming successful in getting the message out. We've got a long way to go.
Some global exposure, that's for sure. Okay, we can move on.
Hang on. hang on. I know that there's a problem with the mics. You can't always hear me. There's not a word. There's not a word right now that specifically means someone who does not believe unicorns exist. It's absurd to think that such a word was there, that such a word exists. And that's the objection that people often launch against atheism. But I can tell you this. If the overwhelming majority of the population believed in unicorns and were attempting to legislate against other people's rights and privileges based on that, I would damn well invent a label and use it.
Yeah, which comes back to what I was saying before.
Yeah, that's where the need comes from.
Particularly in the States, it's for a modern Western culture. You guys are a phenomenon over there. Well, not as I say you specifically, but
yeah. So we're running low on time. I got full callers, so get to the last point quick, please.
The last point quickly was, what are your thoughts around applying just as much criticism and relentless criticism to moderates and liberals who immunize fundamentalists from criticism?
I've been doing it for 6 years.
Amen.
I've been doing it for 6 years.
Okay, enough said.
Yep.
We're definitely on that.
Definitely on board. It's one of the areas where Sam and I are in violent agreement.
Fantastic. Good to know.
Yeah. Actually, most areas. I mean, it's just one or two little things, and we're going to disagree with people about all kinds of stuff. The nice thing is that when disagreements occur, nobody has any divine authority. There's no dogma, no tenets. We can actually discuss this and offer our opinions and agree or disagree and change our mind.
Yeah, sometimes convince each other, which is awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, I got to let you go, but thanks so much for the call. Cheers. So as a reminder, there's only like 13 minutes or so left in the show. We'll be going to dinner after the show's over at El Arroyo. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come. You don't have to be a member to attend almost any of our events. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. Just pick up the phone or pen an email.
Give us a call instead.
Yeah. So we've got Cesar in Queens. How are you?
Hello. Do you guys remember me? This is my fifth time calling on this show.
I remember you.
Yeah, I remember you. How you doing?
You're the...
Awesome. That was like almost a year ago I called, but decided to call. You know, it's been a while, and I like arguing with you guys because I don't have any friends who are atheists, so I like to give it a shot.
Sure.
So basically, I have I always had this original argument for myself. Like I thought about it. It came to me years ago. Basically, when I remember it happened when I was walking to my junior high school. So this was like over 15 years ago. I'd like to try it out. It's kind of unusual, and I won't blame you if you don't understand or it doesn't make any sense to you. Would you like to hear it?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, but try and do it as quickly as you can because we are running low on time.
Okay. Basically, this came to me. I don't know why. I wasn't really provoking any thoughts or anything. It just came to me, just hit me out of the blue. Basically, the argument goes like this. In order to be self-aware, you know, you have a self-awareness right now, obviously. All human beings do. And basically, in order to have your self-awareness, it has to be eternal. Like, you can't... it has to be unbroken. Like, it has
why?
to be forever going.
Why?
Because, like, this, in order to know that you're self-aware, like, it has to be unbroken. It has to be an unbroken chain. I'm not talking about memories or amnesia.
Caesar,
like,
babies become self-aware around the age of 2. So how is it unbroken if they become self-aware and they're not self-aware before the age of 2?
No, I know it doesn't have to do with memories, like, or the development of the brain. Like, I know the argument. Yeah, I know what you're saying. You're not self-aware at such a young age, but that's if you
Okay,
don't
so how is that eternal if it didn't exist at one point?
No. Well, obviously, I'm assuming it did because I believe, you know, I believe in.
What's the justification?
In God and Christianity. So
sure.
Obviously, it did exist before. Now,
Cesar,
I know I can't prove that to you. I don't have evidence for that.
Okay, Cesar, if you're going to believe something because you already believe in a God and use that as evidence for God, that's called circular reasoning, and there's no point in having a discussion if you're going to begin with the presupposition that a God exists in order to prove that a God exists.
Yeah, but that's not my only reason. I have other reasons.
Well, why don't you give us your best reason?
All right, I have my top 3 is the finely tuned universe, Jesus, and the near-death experience.
Okay, well, the universe isn't finely tuned. You have no evidence that Jesus existed, and near-death experiences are hooey. There you go.
Yeah, but you speak with that with certainty. Like, if you're so, like, if there's no evidence that God exists, why even bother doing the show? Why even allowing...
Because the harm of religion exists.
I tell you what,
Yeah.
if you believed in magical pixies that created the universe and there was no evidence to support this, and I felt that your beliefs were harmful to yourself and to others, wouldn't it be a good thing for me to try to educate people about that?
Yeah, but I
there's
do
no
believe
but. There's no
in
but.
Intelligence created the universe.
Well, I know you believe that,
Cesar.
Cesar. I know you believe that. What we're asking for is why. Why should
exactly.
anybody?
All right,
Why should
here we go.
anybody believe that?
Okay, first of all, with a fine-tuned, I don't want to get into these arguments because they're going to take so much time, but I have two scientific reasons why I'm not an atheist, and one of them is because I believe life only comes from life, and I also believe that language is always a product of a mind. Now, that is scientific. That is not
I'll agree with
to believe.
Cesar. I'll agree with you that language comes from mind, and I'll disagree with you on life always comes from life, because we know that life can arise from non-living matter. We don't exactly know how it happened in this particular incident, but we know that it can occur. Both John Oro's experiments, the Miller-Urey experiments, things like that, demonstrate that living material can come from non-living material. So set that one aside, and I'll agree that language comes from a mind.
All right.
But we're not
Christians. About the language from the mind, I'll let that slide with the life from life. I don't agree with you, but all right, let's concentrate.
Then you're wrong.
On the language from the mind.
I mean, no, you're just scientifically wrong.
You don't have an objection.
Sure, that's why I said go with the language one, because on the other one, you're just scientifically wrong. I mean, you just...
I'll give you that. All right, let's not argue about that. All right,
Sure.
So my argument with the language from the mind thing.
Yes.
That life needs information. It needs a blueprint to
DNA is...
work, obviously.
DNA,
we know
Cesar?
this in DNA and all that,
Cesar,
right?
Cesar, DNA is not a language, and if that's your argument, we're done.
DNA is not a language?
That's correct. It's chemicals.
What's
it's a
your
purely...
definition of a language? Is language only from two minds,
Yes.
two human beings? Or
Yes. A language is the product of a mind. It allows communication from one mind to another.
Animals have language, right?
Sure, animals have forms of language.
Exactly, but in order for you to refute my thing with the DNA stuff, is that you have to presuppose that no intelligence created it.
No, I don't have to presuppose that, Cesar. I don't have to presuppose that. What I'm saying is that you have to demonstrate that it required an intelligence, and calling it a language doesn't accomplish that because it's not a language. It doesn't communicate from one mind to another. It's chemical interactions that follow the physical laws of nature. The fact that it's the building blocks of life, that it is often viewed as a blueprint or an instruction set, that's at the cell level. That has nothing to do with minds, and it's not a language, and you don't get to invent a God by merely asserting that it is a language.
Yeah, well, so you're saying that the language of DNA is the actual chemicals? It doesn't have information that's like saying ink on the ink on the book is the actual language.
No, I'm saying it's not a language.
It's not a language. The chemicals itself is not a language. Chemicals
Correct.
are just chemicals.
Correct. The fact
Right.
that the chemicals are not a language, what they do also isn't a language. Their interactions are pure chemical interactions governed by the laws of physics. The fact that they produce things doesn't make it a language. The fact that this is about, somebody has conned you with this idea of information, which is a big fuzzy word that makes it sound all important. It's not. It's not information in the same context. That's an equivocation fallacy. The fact that that there are self-reproducing proteins that build people does not mean that it's a language, and does not mean that they contain information in the same context that a book contains information. The information that we see or what we would identify as information coming from the genetic code, is something that we imbue it with. It is our understanding that produces that information.
Because we have minds that can decipher information.
Not
I know
decipher.
You're saying that inanimate objects, chunks of matter, have the ability to decipher information without a mind.
No,
That's
that's my point. That's my point, Cesar. They're not deciphering anything. They're just doing whatever the physical laws of the universe dictate. It's an entirely physical process, the copying of DNA. There's no deciphering, there's no decision making. There's no, hey, I should probably do this. This thing here says I need an A, so let me get an A.
When I say decipher, I don't mean like think about it. I mean read it. It has to read.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't read, because reading implies a mind that is thinking about it. It doesn't read, it just does. DNA copies it. DNA copies. That's it. It's an action. It's a physical action. There's no awareness there. There's no consciousness. And if there were, it would need to be proved, not asserted.
Okay, so basically you're telling me that there is no information in DNA.
Not in the sense that you're wanting to say that there's information, no.
But in what sense is there information in DNA then?
There's information in the sense that we can look at what happens there and show how that progresses, and we can determine which building blocks will do which things. But that is us looking at the end product and backtracking to say, this is what caused this. It's a causal relationship. It's not a language.
It's understanding the mechanism, right.
I mean, it's the equivalent, I would guess, of saying that a gear in a clock has information because certain gears at certain ratios will change time at change the handles on the clock at a different rate.
As mathematical, an engineer, you can't use these examples of clocks because you're involved in intelligent design.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry that you don't get that, but what I'm saying is that there's no information intrinsic in the gear of a clock or in DNA.
Exactly. Information is not from matter.
You can't say exactly. You can't say exactly. Cesar, you can't say exactly and then disagree with me.
I can't disagree with you?
You can't say exactly and then disagree with me.
No, because we have a fundamental misunderstanding.
Yes, one of us understands science.
I believe that information is completely, matter and information are two completely separate things.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Matter and information are two completely separate things.
Exactly.
And now the show is over. The credits are up. Thanks to the crew. I apologize that we have run out of time. I'll talk to Cesar if he's still around after the show's over. We'll be back next week. Thanks, Don. Sorry you didn't get to jump in on
No, my pleasure.
On the conversation.
You're doing great. You're doing great all by yourself.
See y'all next week. The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.